Open the door. I'll let you in. One thing's for sure, that I'm trusting. Welcome back. It is Sarah Jane from Access Your True Nature. And that was a beautiful piece of the track called Trust from the South African artist Taylor. And I highly recommend that you listen to some of her music. It is pure channeling of the light and really speaks to me in this ability to show up in a messy, messy world called being human. And today I want to really just speak again to this ongoing conversation of depression and anxiety, and how so many people are feeling like something's missing in their life, something that I know really well, and how I've lived most of my life in moment to moment feelings of ecstasy and total hopelessness, and the pendulum between them. And I want to look at these moments where maybe you, like I, have felt this dynamic energy of my physical body changing, the viscosity of life, and having those days where you may be feeling like you're totally missing a limb, or your dorsal fin, your dolphin energy of play and joy and happiness or ecstasis. And just to give you 4 keys, 4 pillars to support you in really knowing the difference between what an illness is and what a disease is. Because the world's psychology scholars have declared various ways of describing and categorizing depression for centuries. And I've spent enough time there in my own PhD of life experience living with this constant pendulation of ecstasy and depression, or what some might label bipolar, of wanting to be here and not wanting to be here, wanting to be in my body and not wanting to be in my body. That depression is an incredibly complex topic, and probably why one of the most misunderstood emotional states of being. That we're not talking about, being in a place of feeling really sad because your cat died, or your friend went away, which is just that pure emotion of sadness. It's not depression, which is that sort of soul-sucking space where you just don't feel like you're ever going to rise above it. So just know that, and I'm being very general here, I have plenty of resources and webinars and musings over on my website, Access Your True Nature, and my various sites like SoundCloud or YouTube, where I speak to this often, because this is my area of expertise, where I really am here on a mission to help people and animals to return to a space of trust, of trusting in mutual cooperation, of a compassionate way of being, and not fear dominating thoughts where you make yourself or something else bigger than the thing that you're afraid of. So what is the difference between an illness and a disease? In my humble opinion, disease is a medical condition, right? It's a diagnosis or prognosis of a structural function in human or animal or plant, especially one that produces a specific symptom or that affects a specific organism or location. So for an organ, for example, or a relationship. Illness is the state of condition of a person, right? So it's the conditional state of feeling. It's the felt sense. And this can show up. Remember too, thoughts create the feelings. And I go into this in the trust process of how to create peace and calm for yourself and for others, by being able to practice mindful regard, being mindful of the thought, the feeling, the emotion, and regarding it with a very compassionate listening, a compassionate inquiry to the lethargy or the moodiness or the anger, whatever it is for you. So you can have a disease and the feeling of being ill, and you can also experience feeling ill but not having a disease. And being ill or experiencing illness can be a very personal experience and can vary significantly between people, because our environment is what shapes us. And in our environment has to include soul contracts. It has to include familial or ancestral trauma, as well as the trauma of witnessing, being the observer of so much trauma and pain that's being inflicted upon the earth, and the way that we're not in oneness with the earth, with other creatures, with the sentience and animals and plants and trees. And that we have to become our own medicine through identifying that and trusting that is a choice first, acknowledging it, and being really, really honest with it, so that we can shape ourselves and edit our Akashic record, change our stories. Because I want you to remember, you're not the story. You are the one that is the storyteller. And as women, this has been passed down to us through generations. The wisdom and the power of what plants heal and what plants hurt, and how to use the earth to support us. And we've lost the art of storytelling from that divine feminine, of women that are deeply rooted in ritual and ceremony, to come from that place. So depression being a mental illness, one aspect of it is that everyone's experience of it's going to be different based on your story and your experiences. And it can show up for a variety of factors when we are triggered, right? This is the work of epigenetics, where we can be sitting with certain triggers on our DNA, RNA, LNA, and it just takes one story or one experience or one trauma to either turn on or turn off dis-ease, which really just means to not have ease in our body, to have discomfort in how we're showing up. So I hope this is making sense, to just know that it's unique to you. Your experience is your experience, and don't let anybody minimize or diminish how you're ever feeling or showing up in your truth. Yes, deep depression has a side to it that is a mental illness, but doesn't it make sense that if your thoughts are shaping your emotions and your emotions are shaping your physical body, that your body chemistry is going to be affected by that? And also to know that some of these factors or triggers are abuse or grief or the side effect of betrayal or of certain medications or substance abuse or lifestyle changes that are creating dis-ease in your morphic field. I also want you to know that there are so many different degrees and categories of depression, and that these should not be taken lightly. But know that you are not the disease. You are not the clinical depression or the major depressive disorder, unipolar depression, dysthymia, hyperdepression. Oh my gosh, the list goes on. Postpartum depression, melancholia, seasonal affective disorder. I speak about that in one of my other videos. Psychotic depression, bipolar disorder, menstrual dysphoric disorder. There's situational depression. There's so many layers and layers of this. And in simplistic form, how do we change this? How do we shift our experience? For me, it's going back to trust, returning to trust that you have everything that you need to live fully engaged in life, to trust your own intuition, to follow your own truth, to express what motivates and moves you, and to look at what you really care about. How do you rediscover your ability to fully engage in how to live deeply happy in your aliveness? We don't need the hero's journey as women, because we are the journey. We are the ones that anchor and hold the light of the masculine. So don't attach to the diagnosis or prognosis. You are not your labels. Okay, I really want you to hear that, because most of us hear and talk and read about all these types of depression. You just have to Google some symptoms and you'll get yourself sick just by reading those. And it's this kind that tragically entails an attempt of suicide, or someone being taken into psychological care because it's so misunderstood. And there's obviously a whole spectrum of grays and reds and yellows and blues when it comes to depression. It also seems to me that there are a ton of people on antidepressants, but no one is really talking about being in the state of depression. Is this a call or a warning from your body to say, hey, you need to take some deep rest. You need to go deep down and get to the root of why you're feeling this way in the first place. Depression, according to numerous sources, is the most common mental disorder in the world. Why is it a disorder? Because we've lost our way in knowing that we are connected. We are part of a whole. We are part of nature. And if we are separating from nature and how we're treating the earth with a lack of disrespect and dishonoring our natural resources, wouldn't it make sense that, of course, you're out of order in your own life and your own body? Do you get that? You know, depression in the generic sources out there is the most common mental disorder in the world, because we're separating from our true nature. We're separating from that we are a part of nature. And I read a statement a couple of times. Wow, you know, this will be the next time, where the World Health Organization estimates that depression will be the second highest medical cause of disability by the year 2030, second only to HIV/AIDS. And, you know, my question and curiosity in that is looking at the immunity, you know, the way that the cells shape and distort and become elliptical in AIDS, in HIV, looking at that the lymphatic system is there to clean our blood, to keep our physical bodies healthy and vital, that if we are distorting through subconscious and conscious thoughts and impure thoughts, of course we're going to disable our immune system. And why? Because we're depressed. We're out of congruence with that we belong to something bigger than ourselves. So just a thought there that I have often and still often go to get a deeper understanding of this. You know, if it's estimated that 2/3 of people that are suffering from depression don't seek treatment because it's just become the norm, and women are more susceptible, 1 in 4 women are estimated to suffer from an episode of depression before the age of 24. That's almost 20 million Americans. I think it's higher in Africa, because we were so connected to the earth and her natural pulse. And that the cultures native to Africa have become so westernized that they're becoming addicted to very Western things that are so far removed from their essence and their true nature and belonging to Mother Earth, to Mother Africa. And how much of that is influenced by adverse childhood experiences. If you haven't taken the test, see how high your ACE scores are as an entry point, if this work is new to you, to really start to educate yourself and know that there is a way forward. That's beautiful. And it's a great adventure. That's something you should get really excited about. You know, and another part of this in my work is healing from the level of the gut. I know when I was at my worst suicidal moments in my life, my gut microbiome were non-existent because I wasn't taking care of myself. So lifestyle changes are very necessary and vital in resolving all these issues around depression and anxiety. You know, pylori is another one, which is the body is influenced. The microbiome have a bigger influence over our state of mind and our well-being than our own DNA. And yet we're starving the good microbiomes. We're killing the good bacteria with all the chemicals that are not only poisoning our bodies, but poisoning our animals and the earth herself. So I've often wondered, you know, about my own relationship with the depression, the D word. You know, have I had it? Absolutely. Do I have it now? Of course. It'll be something that will carry me through to expressing my gifts in the world, and something that you can definitely go deep dive into if you're ready for this. If you're ready, just give yourself permission to say yes. Go and look at the content and the trainings of my life work in the Out of the Blues program. It is life-changing, and we work on every aspect and every level of healing: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and the financial piece, because we are judging ourselves out of oneness and wholeness by the amount of money we have in our bank accounts, and getting into a state of complete self-annihilation because we're making money bigger than us, just as we make disease greater than us. Don't make anything bigger than you. And just remember, depression wears a multitude of masks. And I speak from my own experience of 50 decades of life from this space. And, you know, although stress is never going to go away, if you're someone that lives as a highly sensitive being, you're going to be depressed by your environment. What I've learned is through utilizing these tools and from practicing the lifestyle of good health and good sleep and an attitude change to work with the shadows, is that the time that I spend in that waiting room or that sort of deep dark rabbit hole is intense, but I get the awareness quick, and then I'm able to move out of it a lot faster than sitting in it for months and months and not being able to get out of bed, which was one of my stories. And just know the standard physical and psychological symptoms of depression, which are common across the medical board, but often, you know, even in clinical trials for all these medications for depression and anxiety. If you're listening to this, you're one of the borderlands. You're one of the women that wanders across borders and always has been, finding her space with nature, not trying to fit in, which brings up an incredible amount of pain too. But that you don't fall in the spectrum of those clinical trials. That's why you're looking for more and you're here. But just know, beyond the common medical sort of generalization of the symptoms of what is the visible proof of, you know, giving you a label, it's going to be low moods or sadness. It's going to be feelings of hopelessness and helpless. It's going to feel tearful and irritable and intolerant of others. It's going to look like isolation and deprivation and no motivation or interest in actively participating in life. It's going to look like your inability to make decisions or procrastinate or ruminate too long on things. And it's going to look like brain fog or your inability to concentrate on anything because you're feeling overly worried and anxious all the time or totally out of control. So you're going to have angry feelings, and you're going to, if you're in a way of being able to create enough safety to have healthy angry outbursts because you're feeling safe, that you're not going to be guilt-ridden or shamed or have trouble remembering things or unexplained physical problems like, the mystery diseases, back pain or skin irritations and headaches or weight loss or just talking or moving slower than usual, because you've got this. So I'll add a few more descriptive words to that sort of generalized list that could be bundled up as all the things that I've just mentioned, and that is a lack of self-trust, a lack of self-love, which leads to a lack of no self-worth, or being addicted to things like workaholism or refined sugar or alcohol or drugs, including prescription ones, or feeling disconnected from life, believing you don't have a purpose, or not caring about the life forms around you, including the people you love and the animals you love and plants and nature and all of it. It all comes down to that vital piece that is the mother of all life, and that is trust. And when you're not trusting, then you're not believing you're ever find or deserve love or abundance or deep, beautiful relationships. So given the broad category of depression and the magnitude ranging from blues to psychosis, is there anyone here who hasn't experienced it? Anyone? I've witnessed pretty much every single person in my life, in my clinic, including myself, including animals who don't go into the attachment of thought, but they do feel emotions just as we do, especially guilt, one of the most complex, underrated emotions on the planet. And at one point or another, we all move through and have to learn how to deal with the feelings that may be labeled as depression or anxiety. So to recap and to just close, what does this say about human condition? And I would love to learn and grow from your insights and your experiences, your story of resilience and overcoming, of coming back to true belonging and remembering that trust is your safe place. Because it's so common, so could we start to look at things in another way, have a different perspective on this? Because sometimes I feel that the way society chooses to look at the human experience doesn't always fit, the A being the benefit, the whole, or the B that brings us closer together. I think it brings us further apart. And I think it widens the chasm of this great separation sickness. And I feel that this also goes for depression. It seems to me that within the threads of most societies, of Western modernized societies, that there's been a devolution, not a growth. Because there's an impression there that's deeply, deeply rooted in shame. That warns you that there's something to be afraid of, to feel deeply, to be vulnerable. And it's subliminal messages always, it's not safe. And it's certainly not okay to feel lost or confused or even sad. I remember as a child, my mother saying to me, Sarah Jane, you can never be sad because you look angry. And as a deeply sensitive child, what do you do with that? What do you do with that when you're told that it's wrong? And I also believe that most of us aren't living in the most ideal of circumstances. And it's all environmental factors. It's always the environment that shapes you. Trauma is never in the event, it's in the environment. And it impacts us in the ways that we see ourselves, how we trust ourselves or distrust ourselves, and our body's innate intelligence, and also our ability or inability to live out of trust, to follow our heart and our soul's deepest desires. We're going against ourselves all the time, and it has to stop. If we're going to survive as a species, let alone do the work that we came here to do, which is to restore the earth, to come back to being the guardians, not the destroyers of everything beautiful. including the animals and the plant kingdom and nature. When we aren't living that, of course we're going to be angry and sad and impatient and resort to self-destructive actions. But every one of those is felt in the whole. It's felt out in nature. It has that ripple effect of the butterfly effect, that everything being connected to everything, in our own self-destruction, in our own ability not to trust that we're enough. What message, what energy are we returning to the soil, to this big, beautiful planet that we are actually the visitors of, that we have no ownership over? Know that actions that become habits, and habits that perpetuate the constricting state of that world, is out of your natural state of your true nature. And I also don't believe that as a society we consider how sensitive, how all-feeling we actually are, because we've had that beaten or numbed out of us, right? We opt out one way or another, whether that is a physical suicide or a mental one. We're all committing suicide on some level or another until we're not. So whether we choose to be truthful or not, we are all impacted by the war that is right now taking place within us, that is mirrored out to the wars that we're seeing taking place on earth, on the soil that is being bloodied by the unmet needs of trust. And of course, we're impacted by the images of starving children or slaughtered dolphins, or the horrendous trend on the dog trade in the East. Of course we hurt. How could we not feel that if we are to be human? We're all impacted by the abuse and the unfair treatment of women and children and certain religious and ethnic backgrounds and animals, and deforestation, poisoning our seas, which have more plastic in them right now than fish. And that through our unconscious actions as the collective, we're contributing to that in our waste. We're birds. We've taken away the food source, the chain of the oceans. When the sharks die, they say the seas die. But to watch the birds feeding their young plastic bottles and things that look like food, because there's no food left for them in the ocean because of our own greed. To see oceans of plastic and how it's impacting the life that has sovereignty to be there, it distresses me on a daily basis. How can it not? And of course, we're all impacted by the economic situation, the crisis, the falling rand, the rising price of petrol, the lack of medical care and the uneven distribution of wealth. The old patriarchal ways have not worked. They are destructive, and we have to change that by playing our part in it. Because we are impacted by the mindless cutting down of ancient forests and the killing of the ancient wisdom of elephants and rhinos and whales and sharks. We're impacted all the time by the cries that come from factory farms. We're constantly being overwhelmed and bombarded by the images that haunt me, keep me up at night, wondering how I can contribute to changing the pain that I feel of the oceans, of the dolphins, of the forests that are crying. And what we see then gets recreated in the forms of series and movies in the name of entertainment. We are sick puppies. It's the insanity that we're all committed to and often don't even know it. The impact of bullies and angry horns and road rage and yelling and screaming that comes through the walls that are so thin in the way that we're living on top of each other. And how about the impact of the ridiculous lies that are fed to us by the beauty and pharmaceutical industries and food industries and sex industries? Consumerism. Are we consuming or are we creating? Let's get back to creating a world of better, because this matters too much. Then we can start using our depression and fear as fuel to change the things we're impacted by. Stop buying the lies that are being forced onto you, that you're desperately resisting and trying to make true. Come back to trust. Knowing deep in your heart that it's all bullshit and it has to stop. It has to stop because we're all impacted by it. We're all impacted by it. And the factors and situational triggers of depression, they're endless. And how can you start to create better? How can you contribute to change in the name of the highest, greatest good of all? Start talking about how you feel. Stop stuffing everything into a category of taboo topics or they that must not be named. But if we did talk about them, perhaps something would be then done. What do you think? I have to use that as a lifeline to constantly show up when I don't want to, by knowing that I'm responsible for something greater than me and how I feel. It's my responsibility. And by now, with the We Too movement and everything else out there, as we're awakening, of course the pain is going to intensify because we're awake, and to resist that, to try and go back to how it was, is even more painful. And we don't hold the constricted powers that be accountable or responsible enough. No. Why? Because we're sensitive. We're so deeply sensitive that we don't want to argue or fight, and we want to avoid confrontation. We don't want to make waves. But here's the thing. There's no time to fight because those powers made it so. We're too tired. We're too broke. We're too distrustful. And we're too unhealthy to stand up for truth, for our truth, and believe in ourselves that we matter, that together we can make a difference. The powers that be, they're pulling us all apart. You just have to look at the world to see that. They don't want us to trust one another, and they certainly don't want you to trust yourself. And I say enough of being taken advantage of, enough of being manipulated. And perhaps more of us, we're able to feel supported by our environments. We're given space and encouragement to recalibrate our way of thinking and doing, to realign to our North Stars so that we can live more deeply and truthfully in trust. Perhaps most of us would be able to see and use depression and anxiety in another way. So, could anything good come from depression? Are you ready? Are you up for it? I hope so. Just stay with me here, because one of my favorite Greek philosophers, Aristotle, he thought depression to be of great value to all the insights it could manifest. And he also believed that there's more empathy in people who have or have had depression or anxiety, because they become more aware of others' suffering. This is the compassionate inquiry that I speak to. It's the mutual regard. for how someone else is feeling that is totally selfless, right? Because you're not focusing all your energy on yourself, which is selfism, selfish. It's not bad. It's just a shift in perspective. And every single one of us has the ability to attune to the energy of the world because we are part of it. We are not separate. And every single one of us has the ability to help the person in the mirror and all the people around us to see, to trust that we are enough. Depression, warts, and all. So here are my 5 ways to just shift your perspective and start playing in the energy of trusting that whatever is happening for you. It's happening through you. And you either have the choice to receive it and stay in the waiting room a little bit longer, to follow your body's natural impulses, to show up, to stand up, to have a voice. So number 1 is all of that, the power of empathy. The power, the life-enhancing, sweet, beautiful, brutal, messy power of empathy. Compassion for what others are feeling. Animals, plants, nature, other people. It can have an astounding impact on how you are responding to life, to live into your legacy, not just for you, but for everyone and everything. That's the sacred space of activism. That's the spiritual activism, where we allow others to feel what they're feeling without the need to fix, without the need to make them wrong or blame them. It's devoid of judgment. It's just that honest connection I teach in the trust process that doesn't respond with, oh, well, or at least this, or it could have been worse, which is commonplace in South Africa because everybody's been affected by violence of some form or another, whether that's a car hijacking or a home invasion or being in the crossfire at a shopping center where people are stealing from banks or shops. It's so easy to minimize our sensibility of suffering. And every single one of us has the ability to help people. That's why we have mirror neurons, to see the beauty and the goodness that is in me, in somebody else that I cannot see, and vice versa. And when we allow others to feel what they're feeling, we give ourselves permission to do the same. We're all allowed to feel without judgment. And perhaps the truth can find an easier passage into our reality when we trust that. That's when it becomes easier for all of us to let go of what no longer serves us or the world. Number 2 is change. Life-enhancing, infinite, beautiful possibility that is deeply rooted in trust, but also knowing that we trust ourselves to know we have the power of choice. We create the power of choice in order to change for the better. So instead of depression symbolizing a limitation or a weakness, it can be a pillar of strength that signifies something needs to change. It's a rebirth and a recalibration of our mindset and lifestyles. And going back to symptoms of depression, deflating, going down, deep resting, reflecting, what box, what prison are we keeping ourselves as the eternal jailer? And how can we use that to break free the liberty that horses show us, who have such resilience, who don't ask for a lighter load, but a stronger back, that are so sensitive to environmental changes. Don't lose your sensitivity and change. Use that, the power of choice to change, that you have permission, because you say it so, to spark creation and movement in your life and in the ways of the conscious collective. You know, depression is the canary in the coal mine. It's your alarm clock that is going to ring and ring at volume 10, precisely at the moments when you are out of alignment, so that you can have a moment of another great evolution and growth and awakening in your life, and then go and share that with others. And let's look at the power of vulnerability. Again, another word that has become commonplace, so much so that sometimes I feel it's losing its energetic resonance, its force, its life force in its essence of vulnerability. And instead of seeing it as a negative reflection of trauma or your grief or your shame or your guilt or our collective of all of that, our collective sadness, who are we not to let it be a source of dark beauty, the dark horse, the lone wolf, the one that goes into the cave alone, who goes deep down into our knowing gut parts that innovate and create out of a deep and grounded, seated trust to be more loving to ourselves, and for others, and for life. That's life altering, the seed of vulnerability. Planting that in your garden and tend to your internal garden from that space. There's no place for fear there. There's no judgment there. There's just incredible strength and courage and resilience, because you're awake and you're not turning away from the very thing that is there. Trust in the universe, trust in others, trust in life to support you. But you just couldn't see it because you were powered up and armored up to try and keep yourself safe. And as we sort of come to the end of today's love note, your dose of medicine, let's circle back around to trust that can only occur in presence. Oftentimes, our depression can lead us to past regrets or worry of the future. So what if we transform depression to trigger our ability to become present within the present moment? It's a moment by moment response, not a reactiveness to life, because you're not going back into the past to find the story and the reason and the justification why you cannot be present. And you're not going so far into the future that you cannot create, because you're not present with the resources and how resourceful you are in the now. So no matter how you may be feeling or what you may be doing right now, you are in the midst of your greatest personal work and our collective group work that is only coming into its being because we are being more present. And the more present we become, the more obvious this becomes. When we are present or practicing presence or in mindful regard, we have to be with what is in that moment. And that's how you keep yourself safe. Not by strengthening your control mechanisms or tightening the girth or increasing the intensity and the force of the whip. That's unsafe and that is dangerous. So just know that when you're present or in this place of mindful regard, whatever the inner saboteur is saying or whatever mind chatter is happening in the monkey mind that isn't serving you can and will eventually get very quiet and give rise to the wise woman medicine. It's always been there. You just couldn't hear it over all the noise and distraction. That sense of who you are, it never comes by constricting your feelings. It comes through trust and a deeper sense of knowing and receiving and owning and being exactly who and what you are in this moment, in this deep down inside. We all really want more of that. That's true belonging, and that is what I hear from my pack, from my tribe, from my own inner longing, more and more. And it's right here, right now. It's all here for us if we just trust in life. And trust that within the struggles resides your living legacy, your evolution, and your eternal beauty. So I leave you with a question. Isn't it time to start looking at your life, to start being alive in your life and receive the gift of all of it, all the effort, all the challenges, all the places you have overcome and grown a little differently because you said yes to your life? Isn't it time to say, yes, I'm having this. This is my life and I'm having it now. You chose it. You have and always will be at the center of your universe. And be that ripple, that virus of love and faith and bliss and grace and change and trust. Let that spread as a contagion across the planet. And may that get you excited. Because now your depression becomes one of your alchemistic tools of change, your wand for wonders. Join me again. I'd love to know your insights, your comments, your questions, how this landed for you. And what have been some of your greatest gifts of depression or anger or anxiety or fear that you are using in your life to illuminate and hold the dark? Share that so more of us can come back into the We Too movement and create a love revolution that creates better, not just for ourselves, but for everything. And if you like this, please share it, comment, send it on in the name of love and light and trust. And join me over at accessyourtruenature.com or on my Facebook page, where I occasionally jump in and speak to the medicine of trust that you asked me for. And until then, know that you're loved. I love you. Bye. Then I would give you that call.
racing faster from the other side. I wanna break all rules just for tonight. I wanna break all rules just for tonight.